In the second part of the chapter, we're going to look at indirect finance and how it plays an important role in our financial system. Indirect finance is when your lenders and borrowers are not going to interact directly, but in fact, the funds are going to be exchanged through a financial intermediary or financial institution. Financial intermediaries can be your chartered banks, as an example. There are many different types of financial institutions, but we'll look at them later. Now, financial intermediation or indirect finance is the primary route through which most external financing is done by businesses. In Canada, more than 2/3 of external financing is done by indirect finance and not through financial markets, which is your direct finance. Now, why are financial institutions so important? There are three main roles for financial intermediaries that we're going to look at. Now, the first role that financial institutions play is that they reduce the transaction costs of financial interactions. What are transaction costs? That should be your first question that you ask. Transaction costs in a financial interaction can be in the form of legal costs. They can also take the form of sales costs or regulatory costs. Now, all of these are different examples of transaction costs. If any one of these is too high, it can act as an impediment to entry for that financial interaction to occur. In order to understand this, you can take a very simple example of a friend of yours who wants to borrow $500 of you. To ensure that you get your money back 1 year from now with some interest, you would want this contract to be in writing, as in the form of a legal contract. If you go to a lawyer, he might charge you $1,000 to write a very tight legal contract, which will bound your friend to return you your money with some interest at some specified time in the future. $1,000 for this legal contract, whereas you were only lending your friend $500. It does not make sense. So we see a lot of people will then not go this route, and because they do not feel secure, they might not even then go ahead and lend this money out. So here we see that if transaction costs are very high, people will not be entering financial markets. They will not be pursuing credit opportunities, and therefore we will see overall reduction in financial activity in our economy. Likewise, you could have your sales costs or regulatory requirements which are very high, and therefore a lot of small businesses or individuals will not go ahead and pursue those routes because of the high costs of entry, and they will not be able to participate in financial markets directly. Now, how do financial institutions lower these transaction costs? The first thing to think about is your microeconomic concept of economies of scale. In your principles of micro, we learned that as a firm increases its scale of production, so it's in producing now a lot more, its per unit fixed costs start to go down, and it causes its average cost or per unit cost to go down. So if you recall, this was this very simple downward sloping ATC. Higher the level of production, lower is your average total cost. So we see declining fixed costs over here. And that is exactly what a financial institution faces. They do not have to have a legal contract with just one client. They have thousands of customers. In fact, for big banks, there could be millions of customers out there. So they just need to have a tight legal contract written once, and they can use the same legal contract for multiple customers out there, and thereby reducing their legal cost per unit drastically. It makes a lot more sense for them to go pursue a fancy lawyer to write that tight legal contract for them rather than your friend who was not in a position to undertake that high cost. Now, economies of scope is slightly different, and again, it's your microeconomic concept. Over here, we are looking at when a firm produces different products, but in doing so, it reduces its total cost of production in comparison to single product firms. So if these two products were being produced independently by two different firms, costs would have actually gone up. Firm 1 is producing just product 1, and firm 2 is producing product 2. In our example, for a financial institution, you can think of a bank which is now providing different type of loans. One loan could be your mortgage, so it's a house loan, and the other type of loan could be a student loan or an auto financing loan. Now, these are completely different type of loans that they're giving to different customers, but some of the fixed costs associated are exactly the same. So they have the same type of inputs that can help you produce both of these different type of outputs. And in doing so, they will overall reduce their total costs of producing both of these goods together at the same facility. Financial institutions also become very good at providing liquidity services. Liquidity services are additional services that your financial institution provides to their customers. These can be in terms of providing you a checking account. So they're holding your deposit, but they're also providing you a liquidity service. You can cash your account at an ATM or by writing a check. They can provide you overdraft facilities. These are additional liquidity services that they can now provide to their customers, and that will allow their customers to undertake their transactions more easily and more efficiently. The second reason why indirect finance plays such a large role in our economy is because it improves risk sharing in our economy. The first one over here is your asset transformation. It is the process of converting a deposit into a loan. In doing so, what type of asset are we making? So remember, deposit is an asset for the holder of this deposit, so person who had deposited money at the chartered bank, and it's a liability for the bank which is holding this deposit for that customer. So deposits are typically short term, especially checking accounts. There's no fixed term. You can withdraw your money anytime you want to. So when banks take many different deposits and convert them into long-term loans, also risk-free, whereas loans are high-risk assets. Thirdly, banks will have a lot of small denomination deposits, which they will combine to make a large denomination loan. The interest rate that the bank charges on the loan is also a lot higher than the interest rate on the deposit. If they are paying you any interest for checking accounts, that typically zero, but for savings or other fixed term deposit, it might be slightly higher than zero interest rate. That's still a lot lower than the interest rate that they will charge off the loans that they're giving out. They're not only spreading risk in our economy from people who are not equipped to take on risk to those people who are equipped to handle risk, but they're also making a profit in doing so. So this process is called asset transformation or risk transformation. Financial institutions also allow us to share risk through diversification. And as an example of this, you can think of mutual funds. Now, what are mutual funds? Mutual funds allow us to participate in different type of financial markets at the same time with not a lot of money. So I could have maybe only $100 that I'm saving monthly, and I choose to put them in a mutual fund instead of a regular saving account. The $100 over there in my mutual fund allows me to participate in different type of financial instruments. I could be purchasing stocks and bonds through a financial intermediary. You should obviously think that $100 would not be able me to buy any stocks or shares or hardly any corporate bonds out there because they're of large denomination. A mutual fund gathers the capital from different investors, pools it together, and then invests on their behalf in different type of financial markets. This allows these investors to enter these financial markets which they otherwise would not have been able to do so on their own. The legal costs, regulatory costs might have been too high for them to ever enter these financial markets independently. However, the financial institution, in this case, the mutual fund, allows these small investors to participate in financial markets. So we see indirect finance playing a very, very large role in our financial economy by promoting diversification, by reducing transaction costs, and lastly, by reducing asymmetric information problems. Now, what are asymmetric information problems? A symmetric information is when two parties to a contract have exact same information or have perfect information. No party is privy to more information than the other. Asymmetric information, on the other hand, is a situation when one party has more information than the other party. Or you could think of this as a situation in which one party does not have enough information about the other party to make accurate decisions. Now, this will obviously create a lot of problems. In our finance side, let's look at this problem in terms of, a friend coming up to you and asking you for a loan. If he's just a good acquaintance, not a very fast friend, you're not really sure about his habits, his hobbies, his personality type, what is he going to do with that money once he borrows it off you? If you trust the person, you might go ahead and give him that money. But if you don't, you will not be willing to lend those funds out. This is the problem of adverse selection. So there is an information gap before the contract occurs. If we see that there are a lot of information gaps in terms of adverse selection already out there, we will end up seeing a lot of borrowers actively pursuing loans who are actually less likely to pay back that loan. So we have lemons flooding the market. Lemons are your borrowers who are more likely to create an adverse outcome. With this type of environment, lenders will of course not be willing to lend out their money, and we will see overall a decline in credit. Available credit will go down. Because of low availability of credit, investment in the economy will go down. We will see GDP declining, economic growth will be declining or becoming stagnant in the future. Financial institutions help reduce these type of information problems, primarily through screening the borrowers that are walking into their financial institutions. A financial institution will typically ask you for your credit history, what you're doing, how much you're earning, etc., thereby creating a profile for you and evaluating you whether you're a good risk or a bad risk. Second type of information gap is of moral hazard. This is the information gap that occurs after the contract has already been signed. So moral hazard is now that once you have given the loan, how do you monitor the activities of your friend? As an individual lender, you do not have the capacity or the resources to monitor your friend's behavior or his activities. Will he actually go out and pursue that investment opportunity that he was talking about or he had proposed? Or will he just go out and, just shop the money away? How do you control his or her behavior? And the more moral hazard problems we have, the less lenders will be willing to give out loans. So that again creates a credit crunch in our economy. Financial institutions can again overcome this problem or mitigate this problem. They can never completely eliminate these type of information problems, but financial institutions can to a large extent mitigate them. How do financial institutions mitigate moral hazard? This is done through monitoring of borrowers. Now, monitoring can be done through contracts, very tight contracts which contain within them restrictions on the behavior of the borrower. These are also referred to as restrictive covenants. This can be in the form of not taking any additional loans from other financial institutions. This can be in the form of how they are stipulated to use those funds, or if they seek out additional loans, they have to satisfy certain requirements. Now, what type of financial intermediaries do we see in our economy? There are three main types of financial institutions. We have our depository institutions. These are any institution that takes deposits. We have our contractual saving institutions, and then we have our investment intermediaries. In case of depository institutions, these would be your chartered banks. These would also include your trust and mortgage loan companies. I'll just write TMLs. And it would also include your credit unions. These are all your deposit taking institutions. Then we have our contractual saving institutions. These could be your life insurance companies. It could also include your pension funds or your retirement funds. These are called contractual saving institutions. Because you have a contract with this institution, you are putting some money away for some certain time period, maybe every month, every quarter, every year. It's a way of saving for the economy. And lastly, we have our investment intermediaries. Investment intermediaries are quite a few. I'll just list some of them down over here. Finance companies. It would also include your mutual funds, your money market mutual funds. It could also include your hedge funds and investment funds. So these are some type of financial intermediaries that we see in our financial system. Remember, our main focus will be on chartered banks later on in the course and on the working of our central bank. Financial system is one of the most heavily regulated sector of our economy. Now, what are the reasons of financial regulation? Number one, to increase information available to investors. Financial institutions themselves could be subject to moral hazard problems or adverse selection problems. What type of people are entering these financial institutions? Who are the directors of these institutions? Who are the people running these banks? Screening and monitoring is also done by your regulators to see who is entering the financial system. First, let's write this down. We need regulation to increase information and to reduce moral hazard and adverse selection. Regulation is also undertaken to enhance the efficiency of our financial system. Efficiency is when we are reducing our costs and making the exchange of these funds more efficient, more quickly. So the more quickly the funds enter our economy, the more quickly purchases are being undertaken by big firms, investment is going to go up, GDP is going to go up, and we're going to see a stimulus in our economy. So the lower the financial frictions, lower the adverse selection and moral hazard problems, higher will be your efficiency of our financial system. Secondly, regulatory agencies also want to ensure the soundness of our financial intermediaries. Are these financial intermediaries stable? Can they stand in the face of shocks? In order to prevent major financial crises, bank runs, bank panics that can destabilize the entire economy, regulators have put in place a lot of tools. These tools could be in terms of restrictions on entry, restrictions on competition. These could also be in terms of reporting requirements. These could also be in terms of restrictions on asset holdings. And lastly, this could be in terms of Deposit insurance. So the regulator wants to ensure that your financial system is not a house of cards. It does not collapse with the first gust of wind. There are different type of regulatory agencies operating in the financial system, overseeing the workings of different type of financial markets and financial institutions. On the top of our list are our Provincial Securities and Exchange Commission. Provincial Securities and Exchange Commissions oversee your organized exchanges and your financial markets. The equivalent of these bodies would be your Securities and Exchange Commission in USA. Over there, it's a federal body that oversees their exchanges and their financial markets. Then we have Central Bank in Canada, that is the Bank of Canada, which regulates financial institutions, primarily your deposit-taking institutions, which were chartered banks, trust and mortgage loan companies, and your credit unions. The equivalent of the Bank of Canada across the border would be the Federal Reserve System, or the Federal Reserve in short. Federal Reserve is the central bank for USA, conducts monetary policy, and also ensures the stability and soundness of the financial system. Next on the list, we have Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. This is a Canadian agency, and it oversees not only your deposit-taking institutions, which were your banks, credit unions, and TMLs, but it also oversees your insurance companies, your pension funds, your large contractual saving institutions, and your investment for companies. The equivalent of OSFI in USA is the Federal Financial Institution Examination Committee. Next, we have Canada Deposit Insurance Corporation. The equivalent body in USA would be your Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. CDIC insures all deposits up to a limit of $100,000, and in doing so, short circuits are bank runs and bank panics. We will talk about the role of CDIC and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation later on in chapter 10, when we see how bank runs and bank panics are short-circuited because of these deposit insurance corporations in place. In Quebec, we have the equivalent agency, Quebec Deposit Insurance Board, plays a similar role to CDIC, but its domain is the Quebec only. In the event that the life insurance or the health insurance agency goes underwater, the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Compensation Corporation will compensate the insurance policy holders. It also regulates the life and health insurance companies in Canada, making sure that they are financially sound and stable. Then we have Property and Casual Insurance Compensation Corporation. This body oversees your property and casual insurance companies. Example of property and casual insurance companies would be companies that provide insurance for your property, like your car, your houses, your businesses, etc. So this was an overall view of our financial system in a lot of detail. As a quick recall, we initially looked at financial markets, different type of financial instruments, and now in this video today, we have looked at our financial intermediaries and what type of role do they play in our financial system.